Of all the things that die, ego dies the hardest. There is no hard arrest, no sudden stopping of the breath, just a slow and painful grieving as ego feels its power leaving, struggling against the dreaded cross, wrongly thinking death is loss. But if and when it dies in grief, how welcome is that sweet relief. Now there's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Of all the things that die, ego dies the hardest. There is no hard arrest, no sudden stopping of the breath, just a slow and painful grieving as ego feels its power leaving, struggling against the dreaded cross, wrongly thinking death is loss. But if and when it dies in grief, how welcome is that sweet relief. I don't know how many years ago it was when I felt that the Holy Spirit gave me those words poetically, but I wrote them down and kept them, and I've tried since then to let that message balance my life. We pastors and anyone up front who are speaking before congregations and groups of people suffer a tremendous, I would say, opportunity for ego to move in very powerful ways. But I want to observe this. The greatest opponent that the authentic ministry of Jesus Christ in us has is our own ego. And the devil will prompt it, push it, applaud it, do everything in his power to get us to respond. At any rate, I wrote those words really as wisdom for myself, to realize that ego dies the hardest. There is no hard arrest, no sudden stopping of the breath, just a slow and painful grieving as ego feels its power leaving, struggling against the dreaded cross, wrongly thinking death is loss. But if and when it dies in grief, how welcome is that sweet relief. Years ago, I began periodically getting the impulse to write poetry. And I did, but then I would frequently tear them up and throw them away because I did not want to be known as a poet. But the poetry kept coming, and I periodically would jot it down and keep it. And in fact, when Laurie and I were living in Atlanta, I became a member of the Atlanta Writers Club and won awards on some of the poetry. And then there were certain times when the Holy Spirit would prompt me. And sometimes that would be in a moment of grief or despondency. When my own family members began dying, I wrote this: I see them running to me across the fields of heaven. Mama with her arms outstretched, Papa shouting anxious welcomes. You're home, they greet me. Amazement floods my soul. All that was lost is recovered. All that was broken is whole. I'm home, I answer, aglow with the brightness of dawn. Their arms fall like light about me to the strange excitement of song. The full restoration has happened. Eternity has swallowed time, for home in the sage fields of heaven is as much before as behind. I love that, even though I wrote it. I'm thankful to God for the truth of it, that home in the sage fields of heaven is as much before as behind. I don't know when I wrote these next words, but it came to me that in a physical sort of way, God has revealed himself in an overwhelming display. And then somehow these thoughts came to me. Ah, fools, had we but eyes to see into the realm of microscopic things, to step inside the spider's egg with its own suns and galaxies. Here, we'd behold creation in full display, and the flawless pearl of system find that touches every insect, leaf, or stone with the same brushstroke of design. Astonishment would seize our breath and silence us, as quiet as death, to behold creation's chartless realm compressed inside the tiniest cell. But more than that, to understand God's whole display of nature inscribed in every cell of man. At any rate, I want to read a couple other thoughts with you that came to me in moments of grief. My wife was in a very tragic automobile wreck, as some of you know. Years ago, we were living in Atlanta, very beautiful situation, and then suddenly a true crisis hit, and she had 13 broken bones, a collapsed lung, and a concussion of the brain, and it did not seem that she would even survive. Well, in the midst of all that, my grandmother died, 98 years old, in Miami. Laurie and I were in Atlanta, and I left the hospital, left my wife's bedside to drive home to get dressed and ready to fly to Miami for my grandmother's funeral. And one of those wonderful moments, I passed in a neighborhood a Salvation Army band standing on the sidewalk with a few instruments and a few singers, and a little crowd had gathered around them. And so I just quickly pulled to the curb, got out of my car. I needed desperately what they had. And while I was joining with them in the hymns, that's what they were singing, my eye fell beyond them on a yard. And this was not a real elegant neighborhood at all. It was an old section close to the downtown of Atlanta. And there in the yard by the steps of the house was a sunflower plant, the kind that just has one huge bloom. But it was in now the fall of the year, and the plant had actually died, and the stem had bent and was facing the ground. And you know, I suddenly saw in that my grandmother. I saw my grandmother, her life, just paraded before me. And I wrote these words, they just came to me. Speaking of her, in youth, you turned toward dawn's first light, following its course throughout the day, with stem erect, with blossom bright, as if youth in spring had come to stay. But not so, for came the days of August heat, of fading bloom and swelling stem, of holy purposes pushing up within to serve a grander, nobler end. And now, to that end, in reverence you bow, unmoving before the sun, head heavy crowned with wisdom's toil, and gazing downward toward the soil, from whence your infant seed had sprung. You acknowledge him who through your summer's life now sees his own perfections fully done. It was an amazing moment to me when in that dead sunflower plant, having fulfilled its mission and its course, now its head full of seed, head heavy crowned with wisdom's toil, and gazing downward toward the soil, from whence its infant seed had sprung, acknowledging him who through your summer life sees his own perfections fully done. God bless you. Think on these things. Remember to press that little subscribe button and let us know you're watching. Some of you are around the other side of the world. Let us hear from you. You can do that on Facebook. Some wonderful way and means that we have today. In the meantime, pray for this ministry, that God will keep me alive and alert to the last moment of breath I have. I'll be 90 in a couple of months, and I'm looking forward to that wonderful moment of celebration. So celebrate it with me. God bless you. Love you big. We'll be back visiting again soon. Bye.